Hey, welcome back to our multi-part documentary on legacy of the Montgomery County Courthouse. And there is part one before this that it kind of explains what we're doing. You're currently in part two. And in part two, we're going to continue where we left off and talk about the courthouse facilities and where we are, how it affects us at the bird's eye view. And then we're going to look at what other counties are doing to address this problem, because there are many counties in Texas facing this problem, and it's all for the same reasons that Montgomery County is facing this problem. So we will begin where we left off, which is January 2025. And the overview of our courthouse facilities. As we talked about, we have the original structure in the center here with the big yellow circle. It was built in 1936. The wings that were added to that facility in the 60s. We have across the street the Ancillary County Court at Law building. We have just to the north of that the building that houses our 4 felony courts that used to be solely built in 2002 for administration offices. And then to the left, we have the Keyshan building, which is currently handling our jury assembly. Now, what that has left us with is modern safety concerns with buildings that were created in the 30s and the 60s. Also, for the same reasons, we have a lot of concerns with ADA. There are a lot of expensive repairs that have to be done to that building with those wings. We also have the Annex building and the Allworth building, which were both designed as offices. They're connected by crosswalks to the other buildings and also have created additional and similar safety concerns because it's created the number of points of entry to the courthouse facilities. And also, none of those facilities have any of the recommended ingress, egress for people who are incarcerated. We'll talk about that more. And again, there's really a limited time to fix these problems because we have waited so terribly long in lieu of doing a full infrastructure upgrade. We've kind of patched and band-aided all these buildings together, and we've caused more problems rather than less. So going forward, here's the bird's eye view with regard to courthouse security. As you can see, there are a lot of individuals in that room. That is the felony courts building. That is the lobby area. That lobby area is the same lobby area that 4 different felony courts are using. On this particular day, the 9th District Court is having a docket, and these are all the individuals that are waiting for the doors to open to go into that docket. Now, before we get a little further about what that means and where we are, understand that in addition to the World War II building that has the expensive repair, we have several power issues that there are no generators really to adequately function for the entire courthouse complex with the multiple buildings. That creates situations where I cannot take care of from my office things like our mental health docket. And before we go any further on, Judge Claudia Laird and Judge Kristen Bays is going to be joining me on this presentation. And we are kind of the spokespersons for the courthouse right now. We're part of the Court Facilities Committee that was put together by the Board of Judges. And so this is what we have been tasked with. It has not been fun. We've been enjoying meeting everybody, but it has been—
Some days it's fun.
Okay, Kristen's having fun. It's been a lot of time that it's taken away from us in our courtrooms and our families, and so understand that we wouldn't be here if this wasn't serious and important to both of us and to the judges and the judiciary in general. We have discussed many safety issues. Those have to be discussed in executive session. The reason for that is if we broadcast where all the safety weak points are of the courthouse facility, needless to say, that will in itself become another safety problem, because we would be broadcasting to people how to make it through our safety precautions at the courthouse. I'll discuss that with you a little further in a moment so you can kind of see a little bit more insight to that. We talked in the last broadcast about not having an overflow courtroom, so we have no place to do additional dockets when a judge is in trial, which is how we keep our courts going when we do start trials and we're not available in a courtroom to be able to both do a trial and also handle all the other motions and pleas that come with different cases. And there is also an entire floor of unusable space, I think actually two, in the main courthouse, which Kristen's going to talk to you a little bit about. We have asbestos coming out of the 1966 wings, which we talked about in the first part of this documentary, and Kristen's going to talk a little more about that. And this slide concentrates on how our inmates are commingled with judges, prosecutors, victims, public, and everybody else in the common areas. And that is what you are looking at in this picture right now, is a common area. When the inmates are brought over, this is how that situation looks. They have done their best to try and get the individuals towards the walls to bring those inmates through. Now, this can create very, very serious safety problems. And in fact, it does create safety problems. It has created safety problems. They were lucky on this day because there was only one court in session. If multiple courts are in session, you can just quadruple the number of people that are waiting to be able to go in, and also the number of inmates that are coming in. Now, if someone decides that they're going to take justice in their own hands, that means that they have ample opportunities to try and harm one of these individuals, which is not a good situation for the individual, for our county, because we are tasked with protecting those individuals while we have them in custody. And then our sheriff's office is also tasked with keeping those individuals safe, which means when something bad happens, they will have to jump in to the middle of a fray and address that situation. We've had bailiffs that have had limbs broken in this situation. Bathrooms are shared and have to be closed off and sealed off for inmate use, which means they're not available to the other people that are trying to have court that day. And it's just in general the reason why modern courthouses have corridors and ways that inmates can be brought in and through courthouses into courtrooms without this commingling of populations happening. I talked to you about safety studies, security studies. All of these documents contain all the multiple pages of documented security problems with our courthouse. Again, we cannot tell you what those are, but what we can show you is the volumes of documents and binders where they are housed. And if there were no problems with courthouse security, those binders would be much thinner than they are, and we would be much happier than we are, and a little less stressed with worrying kind of what's going to happen next at the courthouse. So outside the courthouse, when we have prisoner transport, again, because we do not have buildings that were designed to be courthouses, you're looking at a back alley that is between two of these office buildings that have now been utilized for courthouse space. And normal courthouses have something called a sally port, and that is an area where it is fully secured and gated. A vehicle would be able to pull in through a gate. That gate would close behind the vehicle. Then another gate would open. The vehicle would then move in through that gate towards the courthouse complex. That gate would close, and then those prisoners would be able to be very securely offloaded and onloaded onto those transport vehicles. What you see now is a vehicle that cannot even make it down the alley. It is not large enough. And then those inmates have to be walked down that alley, and you see them entering the back door of one of those courthouses, where they will have to go through stairwells, elevators that are shared with the public, the judges, the victims, and other people's coming and going from the courthouse. I actually had a situation not too long ago where I had some lovely individuals who were in my court for a guardianship proceeding. A lot of times these individuals are elder. These particular ones weren't, and they were in an elevator that opened up, and there on the other side of those doors was a big fight that had happened between a couple of inmates. The bailiffs were trying to drag them off the floor and get them out of the courthouse, and they almost fell right into the elevator with the people who were just trying to come to court to get a guardianship for their loved ones. And they were a little excited by the whole situation, but unfortunately that can be a very normal situation for our courthouse facilities. With that, I am handing this over to Judge Bays, who actually offices in the main courthouse that was built in the 1930s. And she is going to tell you her firsthand experience about all the problems they have in that building. And so off to you, Judge Bays.
Well, thank you, Judge Laird. So yes, this is actually the building where I office. This is where my court is located, and also the courts. There are 9 other courtrooms that are in this building, not to mention the fact that it is filled with asbestos. The picture that you see on the right-hand side of the screen that looks like something out of a space age movie is actually sealing off the door because yet more asbestos was discovered when some carpet was removed in that office space, which is actually my office space. So there you have it. We have the asbestos removal. It's expensive. It's dangerous. It is a very poor way to spend our money. If we're going to spend the money, we should spend it better, but we'll talk about that in a later episode. What you see on the left-hand side and in the middle on the bottom, that would be, yes, mold. County Court at Law number 6, which you learned about in chapter 1, that's actually the court facility of that particular court. And you can see the mold growing up the wall. Also, right above the bench in the courtroom, that's the mold growing right over Judge Valdez's head. So that's just a thing that happens in that courthouse, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. But we also have that. We have some additional tenants who are there besides the 9 courts that use that space for their court activities. We have rats. This one happens to be dead. That one is out on the front steps of the Montgomery County Courthouse, and I don't want to tell you what the white things are all over that body, though now I'll bet you can guess. I will tell you that in the parking garages we have around that 1936, 1966 courthouse, we have 9 rat traps in each of the 2 parking areas. That's where Judge Laird and I park. So yum. But yes, we have plenty of rats in our facility, and that is just yet another thing that we have to put up with in these ancient old buildings. So what else? What else can we talk about? Oh, we can talk about the electrical mess. On the left-hand side, out of my office window at the old courthouse, you can appreciate that there is standing water on those porticos, which you learned in chapter 1, the Texas Historical Commission thought were inappropriate. But you can also see that twisted wire coming down the side of the building. Now, wires are supposed to be inside of the walls for safety reasons, but that's not how ours work. In the middle, that's actually the judge's garage. And you can see that the lighting is really not very special in there. If it were a video, you would see that it's flashing because that light doesn't just stay on. Let's see. We'll play. There it is. Well, no. There we go. That's it. That's it. On the right-hand side, that's a picture from another court. That would be Judge Vince Santini's court, looking out of the window of his court space. You can see some mold that is out there on the top of the portico on that side, not to mention even more wires that are just sort of hanging down randomly. That's the way that our courthouse looks. Well, now we can get to the next slide, Judge Laird. So there it is. We have water problems in this building. Let's start with the fact that there's no hot water. Yeah, I don't know that there's anything more that needs to be said. If you want to wash your hands with hot water to kill germs, you will be unable to do so in this building. Also, you can't drink the water that comes through the tap in this building. So everybody has a water cooler because, yeah, it would basically be asking for Montezuma's revenge to try to drink the water in our courthouse. What we also don't have, though, are sprinklers. So in the event of a fire, that limestone building will become a kiln. There are no sprinklers that will come on to extinguish the fire. But luckily, we have so much flooding in the building, as you can see from the soaked carpet in the middle and the standing water out on the porticos, and also the little forest of mold and fungus that is growing on some of the exterior pipes. There's plenty of water in that building. It just doesn't come through the ceiling. So maybe that'll save us in the event of a fire. Oh, speaking of fires, last year was 2025. This is a picture of the second evacuation we had to have. There was another one after this, a total of 3 evacuations from the courthouse as a result of electrical fires. With the second one, though, we also added to that a gas leak. I mean, what could go wrong? We are so used to seeing these firefighters having to come down when everybody has to evacuate the building that we've basically gotten on a first name basis, and I fully expect it's going to happen again in 2026. So what else can we talk about? That elevator. That elevator is truly the stuff of a Stephen King movie. It is terrible. I will tell you, it's been replaced since these photographs were taken, but at a cost of somewhere between $250,000 and $275,000. But it was under repair, well, replacement, for so many months. And the thing is, that elevator is the only way to get up to the 3rd floor of the old courthouse. So there are people up there working in the Office of Indigent Defense and the Office of Court Administration and adult probation who, if they were in a wheelchair, would be unable to get to their office. There was one woman who had to office on the lower floor because she had had knee surgery. And so she was on one of the rolling carts and could not access her office for months. But look at the cost of getting that thing replaced so we don't have this problem again, and ask yourself, is that a good way to spend our money? Couldn't we spend it better? Now there, we've saved the best for last. What's on the top 2 floors of the old 1936 courthouse? Well, it is the jail. The jail that we used to use and that we abandoned long, long, long ago. And I mean abandoned. Look at those pictures, folks. You can see giant crumbling concrete holes that are on the ground. You can see the rebar through some of these holes because they are so deep, so crumbly. There's cracks everywhere. Some of the doors to the cells have basically become structural members because the building is shifting so much that they're almost holding something up. All the weight, tons of weight of concrete and steel right over our heads, and it's sinking. It's sinking. So much so that building maintenance has now put that sign up on the doors that lead up to the old jail to let you know that it just isn't even safe to walk in that area any longer. What could go wrong? It's right over our heads. So, you've seen all of the many things that there are to see about the joys of working in a nearly 100-year-old building that isn't actually functional. But at the end of the day, where do we go from here? The problem is when the building has to be repaired at every turn, when we are literally replacing elevators because that elevator was so old, you can't get parts for it when it breaks. When we're having to spend extreme amounts of money to take care of that, the question is, couldn't we spend our money better? We need to spend our money better, though, because at the end of the day, we're out of space. We need more courtrooms. We have more courts on the horizon, more about that in the next chapters, but we need more courtrooms. And if we don't get them, then that's when we're going to start running into problems with backlog of cases. that's going to change the quality of life for the people who make Montgomery County home. We can't just continue to spend tax dollars on just a Band-Aid here or a Band-Aid there, when in the end, that costs you more money, both in terms of dollars and cents and your quality of life. There has to be a better solution. And I guess we'll talk about that in chapter 3, Judge Laird.
And we certainly will. So this concludes chapter 2 of the legacy of the Montgomery County Courthouse. In chapter 3, we are going to discuss how there are similar situations in other courthouses across Texas, and many of those situations have already been addressed and are being addressed and were actually studied by experts in Montgomery County with recommendations on how we should address those issues. And we are going to discuss that in chapter 3. Please tune back in and check out chapter 3 for the proposed fix.